was in the middle of parallel parking when my mom called to remind me that my brother's girlfriend had specifically requested I not bring up work at dinner. "Just keep it light, honey," she said. "Tara gets a little intimidated, and we don't want another awkward night." I sat there with the engine running, hands on the wheel, and almost laughed. Tara was intimidated. Right. What I didn't tell my mom, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was that the company Tara's boyfriend had been bragging about landing a senior position at for the past 3 weeks was mine. Every word I said in the next 5 seconds was going to be a lie by omission, and I'd gotten very good at those lately. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the car. I'd been back in the country for less than 48 hours. 6 months in Singapore, overseeing the Asia-Pacific integration of our newest acquisition. Before that, 8 months of restructuring, board presentations, and enough red-eye flights to make my chiropractor genuinely concerned about my spine. I was 32 years old, and I was the founding partner and managing director of Halcyon Capital Group, a boutique investment firm that had, over the last 4 years, quietly become one of the most influential names in healthcare sector financing on the East Coast. We weren't flashy. We didn't need to be. We let our portfolio speak, and our portfolio had a habit of turning mid-size regional hospital networks into nationally recognized systems, with the kind of balance sheets that made bigger firms embarrassed. They'd passed on them. Nobody in my family knew any of this. Not the details, not the scale. They knew I worked in finance. They knew I traveled a lot. They knew I was busy. The last time I'd been home for a proper visit was Thanksgiving, and even then I'd spent most of it on my phone in the guest room, managing a funding crisis in our Chicago office. My mom had knocked on the door at one point and whispered through the crack that I should try to be present, which I found both touching and slightly hilarious, given that my being present had just prevented 43 healthcare workers from losing their jobs before Christmas. But I hadn't explained that. I never explained. Explaining felt like defending, and I didn't think I should have to defend the life I'd built, so I stayed quiet. And apparently, when I stayed quiet, my family filled in the blanks with whatever story made the most sense to them. And the story that made the most sense, I'd come to understand, was that I was struggling. My mom met me at the door with a hug that lasted a beat too long. The kind of hug that comes with a side of pity. "We're so glad you made it," she said into my shoulder. "We know things have been hard." I pulled back and looked at her. "Things have been busy, Mom. There's a difference." She patted my cheek. "Of course. Come in. Your aunt and uncle are already here." The house smelled like pot roast and the particular brand of potpourri my mom had been buying from the same Hallmark store for 20 years. It was a Sunday dinner that had been elevated into an event, which meant my aunt had brought a dish nobody asked for. My uncle had already claimed the good armchair, and my brother had his girlfriend on his arm, like a prop in a life he was actively auditioning for. My brother, who is 4 years younger than me and currently employed as a pharmaceutical sales rep, had been dating Tara for about 8 months. I had met her exactly once before, at a cousin's graduation party, where she'd spent most of the evening showing people her new car on her phone and explaining the difference between her car's paint color and regular white. She was 28, pretty in a very deliberate way, and possessed of the specific confidence that comes from having never been told no about anything important. "She's here," my brother announced from the living room, and I heard the particular brightness in his voice that meant he was performing for someone. Tara was perched on the edge of the couch with the posture of someone who had looked up how to sit at your boyfriend's family dinner and committed the results to memory. She stood when I came in. "I've heard so much about you," she said, which people always say when they have heard very little about you but want to seem warm. "Good things, I hope," I said. "Of course," she smiled. "Your brother says you're in finance, like banking?" "Investment," I said. "Specifically healthcare sector." "Oh." She nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're waiting to find something to say. "That must be tough right now. I feel like the market's been so volatile." "It's been a very good year for us, actually," I said. Something flickered across her face, a small recalibration. She glanced at my brother, who jumped in like he'd been waiting for a cue. "Tara's been crushing it at her company," he said, squeezing her shoulder. "Tell her about the promotion. And so began what I can only describe as a 30-minute highlight reel of Tara's professional accomplishments. She had been promoted to regional sales director at a medical device company called Meridian Health Solutions. She had exceeded her quota by 19%. She had been flown to the company's national conference in Scottsdale. She had been personally recognized by the VP of sales. Each achievement was delivered with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it, and my family received every word with the enthusiasm of a live studio audience. I ate my pot roast and said very little. The pivot came during the salad course. Actually, Tara said, setting down her fork with the air of someone about to say something important, the whole reason I've been crushing it is because of where I'm going next. She looked at my brother, who grinned like he already knew the punchline. I just made it to the final round at Halcyon Capital. I went very still. Halcyon Capital? My aunt repeated. It's an investment firm, my brother said. Super elite, like nearly impossible to get into. They basically headhunt people. Tara got in through the back door because one of her clients used to work there. Tara waved a modest hand. It's their new director of healthcare partnerships position. It's basically the top client-facing role in the division. They're very selective. I had to go through 4 rounds just to get to the final. She looked at me. I think you'd have to know someone to even get a first interview there. They don't really take open applications. Is that right? I said. It's genuinely one of the most respected firms in the space, she continued. Very under the radar, which I actually love. I don't want to work somewhere that's all about optics, you know. I want the substance. My mom was looking at me with an expression I recognized, a small, soft look of apology. She thought this was hard for me to hear. She thought I was sitting here wishing I had Tara's opportunities. When's the final interview? I asked. Tuesday, she said. 10 a.m. They're doing it in-house at their main office. I'm honestly a little nervous because I've heard the partners can be pretty intense. The partners? I repeated. She nodded. Apparently there's a new managing director who everyone says is a total shark. Like brilliant, but cold. I heard she barely speaks in meetings. She just stares you down until you fill the silence, and then she decides whether she likes you based on what you said when you panicked. She laughed a little. Terrifying, honestly. I took a sip of water. She sounds efficient, I guess. Tara shrugged. I'm just going to be myself. I think authenticity is always the right play. I said. Later, when my brother and Tara went to get dessert from the kitchen, my mom leaned over and patted my hand. You're being very mature about this, she murmured. About what? About Tara. About her doing so well. I know it can be hard to see someone else succeeding when you're going through a transition yourself. I looked at her. What transition am I going through? She tilted her head. Honey, we know the Singapore thing didn't work out. The Singapore thing didn't work out. The Singapore thing, the contract, she said carefully. The one that fell through. Your uncle mentioned. My uncle, I said slowly, has no idea what I do. He said you'd been very evasive about your work, and that usually means, it means I've been busy, I said, not struggling. She gave me the look again. The soft, sorry one. The one that meant she'd already decided the truth and was just being kind enough not to say it directly. I excused myself to get more water. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking out the window above the sink at my parents' backyard. The same yard I'd grown up in. The same rusted basketball hoop my dad never got around to replacing, and I made a decision that was less about revenge and more about clarity. Tuesday at 10 a.m., I was going to be in my office, and so was Tara. I drove home with the radio off. The thing about being misread by the people who are supposed to know you best is that it doesn't get easier with time. You'd think it would. You'd think at some point you'd develop a kind of armor. But it still lands the same way every time. This hollow thud, like knocking on a door and finding out it's just drywall. There's nothing behind it. No real understanding. Just a surface that looks like a door. I'd spent years building Halcyon quietly. I hadn't gone the flashy route. I hadn't taken meetings at expensive restaurants or posted about portfolio wins on LinkedIn. I'd built trust by being right more often than I was wrong and by treating the people we worked with like adults. We had 26 employees. We had a waiting list for new client onboarding. We had turned down acquisition offers from two firms that most people in the industry would have killed to sell to. And I had done all of this while sending my mother birthday flowers every year and calling my brother on his birthday and being, by every reasonable measure, present in my family's life in the ways I knew how. And they thought I was on the decline. I got home, opened my laptop, and pulled up the candidate file my head of talent had sent over on Friday. Tara's full name was Tara Hensley. Her resume was clean and well organized, which I appreciated on a surface level. Regional sales director at Meridian, solid numbers, real achievements. Her quota performance was legitimate, the promotion was real. But the director of healthcare partnerships role she'd applied for wasn't a sales role. It was a relationship management and strategy role that required a deep understanding of how capital moved through hospital systems. It required knowing the difference between a cap table and a balance sheet. It required fluency in the language of healthcare M&A in a way that sales instincts, however sharp, couldn't substitute for. I'd read her responses to our written screening questions on Friday afternoon and made a note to myself. Strong communicator, limited structural knowledge, may have been coached through earlier rounds. Now that note had a context I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't going to do anything unprofessional. I wasn't going to walk in Tuesday and make it personal, but I was going to do what I always did, which was ask the questions that the role actually required and let the answers speak for themselves. The same standard I applied to every candidate. On Monday, I called my head of talent. The Hensley candidate for healthcare partnerships, I said. I'll be running the final interview myself. A pause. You usually don't do final rounds for director-level hires. I know, I said. I have a reason. Another pause. Okay, you want me to change the format or keep it as planned? Keep the format, standard final. I'll introduce myself when she arrives. Tuesday morning, I was at my desk by 8:15. I wore what I always wore to important meetings, a dark blazer, simple blouse, my hair back. No statement. Just clean and focused. My office had a view of the harbor that I had earned, and that I still, 5 years in, felt quietly grateful for every time I looked at it. At 9:52, my assistant knocked. Ms. Hensley is in reception. Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then bring her to the small conference room. I was already seated when the door opened. Tara walked in with the posture of the couch, deliberate, prepared, performing. She had a leather portfolio under her arm and a smile that she'd clearly workshopped. She looked at my assistant, then at the woman beside me, then at me, and the smile didn't so much fall as freeze. She stood in the doorway. I let the silence run for just a moment. Ms. Hensley? I said. Please come in. She walked to the table and sat down with the mechanical precision of someone operating on emergency override. Her eyes hadn't left my face. She stopped. Swallowed. I didn't know you worked here. I founded it, I said simply. This is Deb, our head of talent acquisition, and Ravi, our VP of healthcare strategy. They've been with the firm since the early days. I opened the folder in front of me. We have about an hour. Let's get started. What followed was not ambush. It was an interview. A real one. The kind that separates people who understand a field from people who have learned to speak its language without knowing what the words mean. I asked her to walk me through how she'd approach a hospital system preparing for a major capital raise. I asked her to explain the difference between a strategic partnership and a financial partnership in the context of healthcare M&A. I asked her what she would do if a key client relationship conflicted with the firm's fiduciary obligations to its investors. She answered the way I'd expected based on her written responses, fluently, confidently, in the broad, sure strokes of someone who'd studied the vocabulary without sitting in the rooms where the decisions were actually made. She used the right terms. She named the right frameworks. But when I pushed past the surface, when I asked her to take me one level deeper on any of it, she reached the edge of what she knew and tried to paper over it with energy. I didn't embarrass her. I didn't interrupt. I asked each follow-up question with the same even tone I used for every candidate. When it was over, I closed my folder and thanked her for her time. She was still looking at me like I was a problem she couldn't solve. I have to be honest with you, she said as Deb was moving toward the door. I've been working toward this role for 3 months. I feel like I did my best today, but I also feel like I didn't get it. I looked at her. That much was honest, and I respected it. You're a strong candidate in your current space, I said. Your sales instincts are real, and your client relationships are an asset. This specific role requires a different kind of structural knowledge, and the gap is closable, but it would take time. That's not a door closing permanently. It's a matter of fit and timing. She nodded slowly. The performance had dropped. She just looked like a person now. A little deflated, a little embarrassed. Young, in a way. I hadn't clapped at the dinner table. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Did you know who I was? Coming in today? I considered the question. I read your file Friday, I said. I didn't know who you were to my family until Sunday. She blinked. And you ran the interview anyway. I ran it exactly the way I would have run it for anyone at this level, I said. The relationship doesn't change the standard. If it did, I wouldn't deserve the job I have. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her portfolio and stood. For what it's worth, she said quietly, your brother talks about you like you've been through something really hard lately. He genuinely believes that. I know, I said. That's its own kind of problem. She left. Deb came back in after a moment and closed the door. Well, she said. Not the right fit, I said. Log it. Thank her within the week. Noted. Deb paused. Are you okay? I've had stranger Tuesdays, I said. By 5 o'clock, I had answered 41 emails, approved 2 term sheets, and scheduled a call with a health system in North Carolina that we'd been courting for 6 months. I did not call my brother. I did not call my mom. I drove home, made pasta because it was the only thing I felt like doing, and sat at my kitchen counter eating it while looking at the city through my window. My phone rang at 7:30. It was my brother. He didn't say hello. Tara called me, he said. She told me what happened. Okay, I said. You interviewed her. You knew she was my girlfriend, and you sat across from her and interviewed her like some kind of… Like what? Like some kind of power move. I asked her the questions the job requires, I said. I gave her the same interview I would give anyone. She did well in some areas and she has gaps in others. She's devastated. She told me she knew she didn't get it before she left the room, I said. That's self-awareness. That's a good quality. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. Why didn't you tell anyone? About the company? About what you actually do? Mom thinks you've been struggling. I thought you were struggling. We were worried about you. You weren't worried, I said. You weren't worried, I said. You were pitying me. There's a difference. Worry asks questions. What's going on? Are you okay? Do you need anything? I didn't get any of those questions. I got sad looks and careful subject changes and Mom patting my hand at dinner. That's not worry. That's a story you'd all decided to tell about me that was more comfortable than the truth. Silence. I've been running this firm for 5 years, I said. I have 26 people who work for me. I've been in Singapore for 6 months overseeing an international acquisition. I came home 48 hours before that dinner and I was still jet-lagged and exhausted, and the first thing Mom said to me was to not bring up my job because it would make Tara feel bad. Nobody asked me how I was. Nobody asked what I'd been doing. You just assumed. And then Tara sat across from me at dinner and told me I need to know someone to even get a first interview at the firm I founded. Another silence. Longer. She didn't know, he finally said. I know she didn't know, he said it. I know she didn't know, I said. I'm not angry at Tara. I'm telling you what it felt like to be on my side of that table. I heard him exhale. A long, slow breath that sounded like something loosening. Why didn't you just say something, he said. At dinner. You could have just told us. When? I said. Between Tara's Scottsdale conference story and Mom's warning me not to mention my job? When exactly was the opening? He didn't answer. I'm not trying to make you feel terrible, I said. I'm trying to explain how your version of caring for me hasn't actually involved paying attention to me for a pretty long time. He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. I didn't know about Singapore, he finally said. I know. I didn't know any of it. I know that too. That's kind of a lot to not know about your own sister. Yeah, I said. It is. We talked for another hour and a half. It was the longest real conversation we'd had in years. He asked questions, the kind that wound back through time, filling in gaps he hadn't realized were there. I answered honestly, without softening it too much. He kept saying, I didn't know that, in a voice that got quieter each time, like each revelation was adjusting something in him. At some point he laughed a little, shocked, when I told him what Halcyon's current AUM was. That's insane, he said. It's been a good few years, I said. Does Mom know any of this? She knows I work in finance. I'm going to call her. You can, I said. But maybe let me do it. I've been avoiding it for too long. I called my mom the next morning. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and I just told her. All of it. Singapore. The acquisition. The firm's size. The reason I'd been unreachable for months at a time. I told her about the Sunday dinner and what it had felt like to sit there while everyone quietly assumed the worst. I didn't say it with anger. I said it the way you talk to someone you love who has hurt you without meaning to, which is carefully and without the satisfaction of watching them flinch. She cried, not dramatically, just the soft, steady kind of crying that means something has landed. Why didn't you tell us? She kept asking. And I kept saying the same thing. I didn't think I needed to justify it. You don't, she said. You never did. I missed you. And when you went quiet, I just assumed the worst, because missing you was easier to manage if I had a reason. That landed somewhere unexpected. I miss you too, I said. That's not going away just because the firm is doing well. It took another few weeks for things to feel normal, or the new version of normal, which was more honest than the old version had been. My brother came to the city and I showed him the office and watched his face while he stood at the conference room window and looked out at the harbor. He didn't say much. He just stood there for a minute. You built this, he said. We built it, I said. I had good people. No, I mean, you built this and I didn't know. I was worried about you. He turned around. I was actually worried. I know, I said. That part wasn't nothing. Tara, for her part, sent me a short email 2 weeks after the interview. She thanked me for the feedback and said she'd enrolled in a financial modeling course and was planning to pursue the structural knowledge gaps I'd identified. She said she was sorry for the comment about needing to know someone to get an interview. I wrote back and told her the comment was less offensive than she feared and that the course was a good instinct and that she should feel free to reapply in 18 months if she wanted to be reconsidered. My mom started asking about work in a different way after that. Not with pity and not with the cautious subject change energy. Just real questions. She didn't always understand the answers, but she asked them. My brother texted more. Nothing dramatic. Just more. I still don't talk about work much at family dinners. Some things don't change, but nobody pats my hand anymore.